Good portfolio management does not make up for bad financial planning. There's some serious problems with that mindset.
Can you speak to us a little about where they should be focusing their planning efforts?
If you're putting all your time and your attention and it's all spent on building the perfect portfolio, then it's probably time wasted.
Do you have any action items for our listeners going forward?
So when it comes to investing and planning, ask yourself. Hello and welcome to your Retirement Planning Simplified. I am Joe Curry, along with my co-host, as always, Lindsay Wilson. How are you, Lindsay?
I'm great, Joe. So today we're going to talk about good portfolio management won't make up for bad financial planning. So this is Financial Planning Week, and Joe, you're currently attending the FP Canada Financial Planning Conference, which was the inspiration behind today's episode.
Yeah, that's right. So one of the presentations that we saw yesterday was by Benjamin Felix. He's from PWL. He's also the Rational Reminder podcast, and he summarized 19 investment lessons he's taken away from his research, podcast guests he's had on, and the community. And so there are a lot of really good lessons there. And I always enjoy hearing what Ben has to say, but I wanted to touch on one today, which is that good portfolio management, as you mentioned, does not make up for bad financial planning.
Yeah. And so based on our work here, that makes perfect sense. But would you say, despite this advice, most people are coming in with a focus on investments and performance over their portfolio?
Yeah, absolutely. So that is often the case. I think many people actually mistake financial planning with investment management. And I think a big part of that is what people have learned from investment advisors they've worked with in the past, what they're hearing and seeing on the media, advertisements about different portfolio management options. So all these things by default, I'm going to say default, but they kind of just train or they teach people that, like, when they're talking to a financial planner, really they're going for investment management. And so there's some serious problems with that mindset. And probably the biggest is that portfolio management has largely been solved, right? So we talked about it on this podcast before, but there's some pretty clear data that it's almost impossible to beat the market by trying to pick the best stocks. Okay. And I'm going to take a bit of a different angle on this. We've talked about the data. Sometimes data is not enough because money's emotional. But if we look at one of the greatest, if not the greatest investor of all time, Warren Buffett, we'll find that he is actually one of the biggest supporters of index-based investing, right? So he instructed his trustee to leave his inheritance to his spouse, basically all or 90% of it in an S&P 500 ETF. On multiple occasions, he's wrote to shareholders of Berkshire Hathaway, his company, on the difficulty in trying to outperform and how index investing is a better strategy. And despite a lifetime of investment outperformance from Warren Buffett, over the last 2+ decades, so over 20 years, he's actually underperformed his benchmark. So, and I think that maybe the last point I'll leave from Warren Buffett is that he also mentioned that in his entire lifetime, he's been able to identify maybe 10 people early on in their career where he thought that they could actually outperform the market. So that's just talking about how hard it is. So I thought that rather than coming to some of the data that shows that most people underperform when they're trying to outguess the market, I would just kind of lean on someone like Warren Buffett, who is an active stock picker, and how he kind of his feeling is that that's not the way to go. So back a little bit to, why is that so hard? And I'm going to touch pretty high level on this, but the stock market is an information processing machine. So information is very quickly incorporated into pricing. So in other words, if some new piece of information comes out about a company, the price of the stock is very quickly adjusting to incorporate that information. So when you go to buy or sell it, like it's probably already there, right? And also, I think it's important to keep in mind that there has to be a buyer and a seller in every transaction, right? So if there's not enough buyers, then what's going to happen is the price is going to come down until there's enough buyers to meet the sellers where they are. Or flip side, if there's not enough sellers, then that demand is going to push price up until we have enough sellers who are getting what they need to meet the buyers where they are. So someone has to be willing to sell you a stock or buy a stock that you want to sell. And so if you think about that, you can ask yourself, why are they willing to make this trade with me, right? who is it on the other side who's buying that stock or selling me that stock? So could it be your neighbor? Yeah, sure, it could be. But most likely it's going to be a massive investment firm who likely has unlimited resources. They probably have the smartest people, the best technology. And so it's not a game that you're likely to win by trying to guess when to buy and sell, right? So the point here is that if you're putting all your time and your attention and it's all spent on building the perfect portfolio, then it's probably time wasted, right? So if you focus on the evidence, don't complicate it, then you probably are going to get the portfolio you need to help you meet your goals, right? And only focusing on that outperformance, it means that you're probably not building a portfolio designed to meet your goals because you don't know if you're taking too much or too little risk, right? So when it comes to investing and planning, ask yourself, did you win at the end of the game? Did you win, or the end of your life, I should say? Did you win if you build a portfolio that outperforms the benchmark, but you run out of money, right? And so that brings us back to the planning, Lindsay.
Yeah, so that sounds pretty clear, Joe. Hopefully our listeners understand that good portfolio management does not make up for bad planning. Can you speak to us a little about where they should be focusing their planning efforts?
Sure. So to be clear, I think that for most people, living our best life can kind of summarize why we should do planning, right? So with that in mind, here's some of the key areas we can control and we should focus on in our planning to ensure that we are living our best life and contributing to the next generation and our survivors, if that's applicable to you. So, first and foremost, understanding your goals, right? What are you solving for in the first place? That's kind of the number one thing when it comes to building out a plan. So then from there, you're focusing, okay, to meet these goals, to live my best life, how much should I be saving? Or if I'm in retirement, how much can I be spending? How can I structure things in a way that I'm actually paying less tax? So I'm keeping more of that money in my pocket. How do you protect your plan, right? What threats are there that could derail your retirement? Do you need to have insurance in place? Is there other things you can do to mitigate risk to your plan and the risk of you not achieving your goals? What accounts should you be using, right? Should you be using RSPs or TFSAs? When should you have a RIF versus an RSP? All these different things. In retirement, what account should you be withdrawing from first? When do you start taking your government benefits like CPP and OAS? If you're a business owner, should you be taking salary or should you be taking dividends or some combination of the two? How do you know when it's time to make a course correction, right? So what's the plan to know when things need to change because we're not on track? How can you ensure that your family can act on your behalf in a way that, I guess, follows your wishes if you require long-term care and aren't able to make those decisions on your own, and making sure you've set things up to efficiently pass through your state or outside your state if we can make that happen when you pass, right? So the important thing here is all of these items are things that are controlled by you. They have significant impacts on your financial outcomes, and they aren't going to be solved by the unlikely scenario where you actually get market outperformance.
So, taking what we've talked about today, do you have any action items for our listeners going forward?
Yeah, so I think it's maybe just take a couple steps back, take an inventory on where you are today, what kind of planning have you done to date, mapping out your goals. As I mentioned, is kind of the first part when it comes to planning. And then from there, determine what's your best path forward for your planning. So whether that's with a financial planning firm like ours, whether you think you can navigate this process on your own, again, it's figure out how are you going to move from where you are today to meeting your future goals. And I guess maybe one thing I'll add to that, Lindsay, is one of the considerations when you're doing this retirement planning and before even building that portfolio and even thinking about performance is understanding what your retirement income style is, right? Which is something we've talked about a lot lately. So if you're doing this on your own, you want to figure out what your retirement income style is. You can email us info@retirementplanningsimplified.ca, or you can find the show notes at retirementplanningsimplified.ca/blog. And you can find that link for the RISA questionnaire, which will help you identify that income style.
Yeah, and also to mention that we in November did a series on the 4 aspects of the RISA as well, so listeners can find that on the blog page as well.
Absolutely. All right. I think that's it for today, Lindsay.
Thank you.